3.6 million. That's the headline-grabbing, jaw-dropping number the government proudly announced to the nation. A figure designed to cut through the noise, to reassure, to impress. 3.6 million additional National Health Service appointments, supposedly delivered in just the first 8 months of its term. In a country where the NHS is held with a unique reverence, a symbol of national identity and collective care, this was more than just a statistic. It was a powerful statement of competence. On the surface, it sounds like a monumental achievement, a promise decisively delivered, a healthcare system so many depend on finally roaring back to life after years of immense pressure and unprecedented strain. But in the high-stakes, high-pressure world of politics and public services, is a number ever just a number? Or could it be the opening gambit in a complex game of statistical chess? A game where the ultimate truth depends entirely on how you read the board, what pieces are in play, and which parts of the game are deliberately hidden from view. Today, we are pulling back the curtain on this explosive claim. We are not just looking at the number itself, but at the official investigation it triggered. A senior member of parliament cried foul, lodging a formal complaint, and demanding to know if the British public was being told the whole, unvarnished story or a carefully curated version of it. What followed was a deep dive by the United Kingdom's official statistics watchdog, the Office for Statistics Regulation, the ultimate, impartial referee in the ongoing battle of hard facts versus political spin. In this special investigation, we will uncover exactly what that watchdog found, piece by piece. We'll ask the questions that need to be asked. Was the 3.6 million figure even real, or was it a mathematical illusion? What precisely does the government count as an appointment in these figures? Is it the critical surgery you've been waiting for, or something far more routine? And most critically, we'll tackle the question the politicians want you to hear, but perhaps hope you can't fully scrutinize. Does this number truly represent a massive increase in National Health Service activity, or is there a crucial piece of context, a missing part of the puzzle that changes the entire picture? Get ready, because the story behind this single, powerful statistic reveals everything you need to know about transparency, public trust, and the state of the promises being made about the health service that affects the lives of every single one of us. The stage was set for a showdown, not in Parliament, but in the quiet, methodical world of spreadsheets and databases, where political narratives are forged. The government, armed with its impressive-sounding figure, presented a story of success and delivery. They pointed to 3.6 million additional elective operations, appointments, and tests, a tangible result of their policies, a clear sign of progress. This wasn't just a minor update, it was a central claim, pushed out in press releases and used to build public confidence. In a country where the National Health Service is often described as a national religion, and where waiting lists have been a source of profound public anxiety, a claim of this magnitude is political gold. It speaks directly to the fears and hopes of millions, promising that the system is not just coping, but improving dramatically. But then, a voice of skepticism emerged from the political fray. Helen Morgan, a member of Parliament, wasn't ready to join the applause. She refused to take the headline figure at face value. She penned a formal letter to the very top of the UK's Statistical Authority, to its chair, Sir Robert Choate. Her letter wasn't just a simple query, it was a direct challenge to the government's entire narrative. She raised fundamental concerns that cut to the heart of the matter. How, she asked, was the government even defining an appointment? What was the baseline they were using for this grand comparison? Was it a meaningful one, or a carefully selected low point to make the increase look better than it was? And she pointed to the government's own triumphant language, the use of phrases like massive increase, and questioned whether such a powerful description was truly justified by the facts on the ground. This was the spark that lit the fire. A formal complaint had been made, and the Office for Statistics Regulation, or OSR, was now duty-bound to investigate. The watchdog's role is a fascinating and absolutely vital one in a modern democracy. They are not there to take sides in a political debate. Their mandate is not to decide if a policy is good or bad, or if a government is successful or not. Their sole mission is to protect the integrity and public value of official statistics. Think of them as the ultimate referee in a high-stakes match. They don't care which team wins, but they are obsessed with making sure everyone plays by the rules, that the ball is not moved when no one is looking, and that the final score is reported accurately and fairly. They are the guardians of data, ensuring that when the government or any public body uses numbers to make a case, those numbers are trustworthy, transparent, and presented in a way that helps public understanding, rather than hindering it. Sir Robert Choate and his team at the OSR took on the case. Their first task was simple yet crucial: to verify the arithmetic. They went directly to the source, the official statistics produced by National Health Service England. They examined the data for the government's first 8 months in office and compared it to the data from the exact same period in the previous year. The verdict on this first question was swift and unambiguous. The number was correct. The claim of 3.6 million additional elective appointments, based on this specific year-on-year comparison, was arithmetically sound. The government had not invented the figure out of thin air. It was rooted in the official data. For a moment, it seemed like the case might be closed, a point to the government. But the OSR's investigation was only just beginning. Because the most important questions in statistics are rarely about the calculation itself. They are about the meaning. The deeper questions remained unanswered. The second and perhaps more contentious issue was the government's framing of this number as a massive increase. This is where the OSR's role becomes more nuanced. Sir Robert Choate's response was very clear on this point. Judging the appropriateness of descriptive language is outside of their remit. The watchdog does not seek to be a mediator in political debate or an editor of press releases. Whether 3.6 million constitutes a massive increase, a modest increase, or a disappointing increase is a matter for political argument and public opinion. The OSR's concern is different. It's not about the adjective, it's about the context. They believe it is vital that the necessary information is available to the public so that people can form their own informed judgments. And this is where the investigation uncovered a critical, systemic flaw, a piece of the puzzle that was conspicuously missing at the very moment the government was making its triumphant claim. Here is the twist that turns this entire story on its head, revealing how truth can be technically accurate yet profoundly incomplete. When the government's press releases, filled with celebratory language, were published, it was physically impossible for journalists, opposition parties, academic researchers, or any member of the public to properly assess the scale of the increase in any meaningful historical context. Why? Because the publicly available data from National Health Service England, at that time, only went back to July of 2023. Think about that for a second. The data only allowed for one single comparison, the one the government wanted you to make. You could compare their 8 months in office to the same 8 months of the previous year. But that was it. The window into the past was sealed shut. You couldn't see if activity was higher or lower than it was in 2019, before the pandemic fundamentally reshaped our world and our health service. You couldn't see the trend over the last 5 years to understand if this was a genuine surge or simply a return to a pre-existing normal. You couldn't see if last year was an unusually low year, making this year's figures look artificially impressive by comparison. It was like judging the winner of a marathon by only being allowed to watch the final 100 meters. You see the dramatic finish, the runner crossing the line with their arms in the air, but you have no idea if they were leading the whole way or if they've only just recovered from a major fall a mile back and are still running far slower than their personal best. Without that long-term view, without that context, the phrase massive increase is just an empty slogan hanging in the air, impossible to either prove or disprove. The context was king, and the context was missing. Let's imagine what that hidden historical data might have shown. What if, for instance, the 3.6 million increase on the previous year still left the total number of appointments 5% lower than the same period in 2018? Would that still feel like a massive increase? Or would it feel like an incomplete recovery? What if the data showed that the previous year, the baseline year, had seen a significant dip in activity due to strikes or specific funding issues? The rebound might look huge, but it would be a rebound from an artificial low, not a true surge in capacity. This is not just a technicality, it is the absolute core of statistical integrity. A figure without context is not information, it is propaganda. This is a crucial point about how statistics can be manipulated, not by lying, but by selective truth-telling. A figure can be 100% accurate, but simultaneously paint a deeply misleading picture if essential context is strategically withheld. And if you agree that public access to the full story behind the numbers is absolutely vital for a healthy democracy, do me a favor and hit that like button. It shows you believe in transparency over spin. Now, the Office for Statistics Regulation could have simply noted this deficiency in their letter and moved on, but they didn't. Recognizing the public importance of the matter, they took action. They actively engaged with National Health Service England. They made the case that for a proper public debate to occur, this historical data needed to be in the public domain. This is the watchdog showing its teeth, not just commenting on statistics, but actively working to improve them for the benefit of all. And their intervention worked. In what amounts to a quiet but significant victory for transparency, National Health Service England responded to the OSR's engagement by publishing the data all the way back to April of 2018. Suddenly, the picture became much clearer. The sealed window into the past was thrown open. Now, anyone could go and look at the long-term trends. They could compare current activity levels to those before the immense disruption of the global pandemic. They could see the peaks and troughs over the years. The OSR had not just investigated a claim, they had successfully pushed for the release of information that empowers everyone to become their own fact-checker. This new, richer dataset allows for a much more sophisticated conversation, moving beyond a simple and potentially self-serving year-on-year comparison. The final piece of the OSR's investigation addressed Helen Morgan's concern that the government had been deliberately vague about its methods. Had they hidden the goalposts or used a sneaky definition of appointment to inflate their numbers? Here, the verdict was more favorable to the government. The OSR reviewed the manifestos and press releases and determined that, for the most part, the measure being used had been generally communicated clearly and consistently. The official definition was additional elective operations, appointments, and tests. Furthermore, the government had been transparent that the target was to be measured against the figures from the previous year. So, on the grounds of procedural clarity, the government was largely in the clear. They had stated their terms, even if the context for those terms was initially lacking. So, what is the final takeaway from this statistical saga? Where does the truth lie? The story of the 3.6 million appointments is a perfect case study in the complexity of truth in the modern age. The number itself was correct. The government's definition of its own target was clear. But the triumphant narrative of a massive increase was projected onto a dataset that, at the time, lacked the necessary historical context for anyone to independently verify that claim. It demonstrates how a statement can be factually accurate in a narrow sense, yet potentially misleading in a broader one. It highlights the critical difference between data and information, between a raw number and true understanding. This entire episode serves as a powerful reminder that behind every headline-grabbing statistic, there is a story of definitions, baselines, and context. It underscores the invaluable role of independent bodies like the Office for Statistics Regulation, who work, often behind the scenes, to hold power to account and to ensure that public debate is based on the most complete evidence available. It's a lesson for all of us to look beyond the numbers, to ask the hard questions. Compared to what? Measured how? And what are you not telling me? This is how we move from being passive consumers of information to active, critical participants in our democracy. To make sure you never miss these deep dives into the stories behind the stats, and to keep arming yourself with the tools for critical thinking, make sure you are subscribed to the channel and have notifications turned on. The next big claim is always just around the corner, and we need to be ready for it. Thank you for watching.